Tonight, you'll discover what it truly felt like to grow up as a child during the Middle Ages, where your toys were handmade from scraps of wood, your classroom might not exist at all, and your future could be decided before you were even old enough to understand your own name. You'll learn why many medieval children woke long before sunrise, why birthdays were rarely celebrated, and why one ordinary winter could change an entire childhood forever. So settle in and let history gently unfold. Dim the lights, settle into a comfortable position, and allow your breathing to slow. Tonight, we'll quietly step back nearly 800 years into medieval Europe. We'll follow the life of an ordinary child, from the day they were born until they slowly became an adult in a world very different from our own. There's no rush, just quiet history, peaceful storytelling, and a gentle journey into the past. Imagine, for a moment, that you are arriving in a small English village sometime during the late 13th century. The morning air is cool and damp. A thin layer of mist clings to the fields, and the only sounds are birdsong, the distant crow of a rooster, and the soft crackling of fires being lit inside tiny cottages. There are no busy roads, no cars, no glowing screens, only narrow dirt paths winding between simple wooden homes with thatched roofs. Somewhere inside one of those cottages, a baby has just entered the world. Unlike today, there are no hospitals waiting with bright lights and modern equipment. Birth usually takes place at home, surrounded by family members and experienced village women known as midwives. These women have helped deliver dozens of babies over many years. Their knowledge comes not from medical schools, but from observation, tradition, and generations of shared experience. For the family, this moment is filled with both joy and quiet uncertainty. Childhood in medieval Europe was precious, but it was also fragile. Modern medicine had not yet been discovered. Even something as ordinary as a fever or an infected cut could become dangerous. Clean drinking water was not always available, and diseases often spread through villages without anyone understanding why. Parents loved their children deeply, but they also knew that the first years of life were uncertain. Because of this, one of the first important events after birth was not a celebration or a birthday party. It was a baptism. Many families believed a child's soul needed the protection of the church as soon as possible. Sometimes, if a baby appeared weak, a priest would be called immediately. Parents would wrap their newborn carefully in blankets and carry them to the village church, where cool stone walls echoed with quiet prayers. The baby's name was officially spoken for the first time during this ceremony. Unlike today, birthdays were rarely celebrated by ordinary families. Most people didn't even know the exact date they had been born. Instead, important religious festivals or the feast day of a saint were often remembered more clearly than a birthday. Back at home, the newborn would spend much of the day wrapped tightly in long strips of cloth called swaddling bands. Medieval parents believed that keeping a baby's arms and legs straight would help them grow strong. Although this practice may seem uncomfortable to us today, it was considered a normal and loving way to care for an infant. The cottage itself was small and simple. A single room often served as the kitchen, bedroom, dining room, and living space all at once. Smoke from the fireplace drifted upward toward the roof, escaping slowly through tiny openings in the thatch. The smell of burning oak, fresh bread, and damp earth filled the air. Furniture was scarce. Perhaps there was one sturdy wooden table, a few stools, a chest for clothing, and straw mattresses spread across the floor for sleeping. Privacy, as we think of it today, hardly existed. Parents, grandparents, children, and sometimes even farm workers slept under the same roof. As the baby grew into a toddler, the world became one of endless discovery. There were no colorful plastic toys waiting on shelves. Instead, entertainment came from whatever could be found nearby. A smooth stone became treasure. A carved piece of wood became a horse. A bundle of cloth became a doll. Children's imaginations filled the gaps where expensive possessions did not exist. Outside, the entire village became their playground. Chickens wandered freely through the muddy lanes. Geese honked loudly near ponds. Curious cats searched for mice around grain stores, while faithful dogs guarded livestock from strangers and wild animals. Nature surrounded every part of daily life. The changing seasons determined everything. When crops were planted, when animals gave birth, when food was plentiful, and when families worried about surviving the long winter ahead. Even very young children quickly learned to notice these changes. They knew the smell of rain before it arrived. They recognized the songs of birds returning in spring. They watched the leaves turn golden before the first cold winds of autumn swept across the fields. For a medieval child, the natural world was not something visited on weekends. It was home. And from their very first years, every sunrise brought another lesson about survival, family, and the quiet rhythm of life in the Middle Ages. Now, imagine that several years have passed. You are no longer a baby wrapped safely in blankets. You are about 7 years old, growing up in the same quiet medieval village. Childhood, as we know it today, feels very different here. There are no school buses waiting outside, no alarm clocks buzzing beside your bed, and no electric lights to keep the darkness away. Instead, your day begins with the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere beyond the cottage walls. Before the sun has fully risen, your mother is already awake, gently stirring the fire back to life. The glowing embers from the night before are carefully fed with dry sticks until small orange flames begin to dance once again. The room slowly grows warmer, and the familiar scent of wood smoke fills the air. You open your eyes on a simple straw mattress covered with rough wool blankets. You may have shared your sleeping space with brothers, sisters, or even grandparents. Privacy is almost unknown. Families live closely together, not because they choose to, but because space is limited and every corner of the cottage must be used wisely. The floor beneath your feet feels cold. Outside, the village is only beginning to wake. Thin mist drifts over the fields. Cows quietly move from their shelters. Sheep gather together for warmth, while chickens scratch at the damp earth searching for insects. The peaceful silence is broken only by the sounds of nature and the distant voices of neighbors beginning another day. There is little time to stretch or rest. Even as a child, you have responsibilities. Perhaps your first task is carrying a small wooden bucket to the village well. The bucket isn't too heavy yet, but each year it becomes a little larger as you grow stronger. Fresh water is needed for cooking, washing, and caring for the family's animals. Next, you help scatter grain for the chickens. The birds rush toward your feet, flapping their wings excitedly as they compete for every tiny seed. If your family owns a cow or a goat, you might help bring fresh hay or refill a water trough before breakfast. These chores may seem ordinary, but they are essential. Every member of the household contributes in some way. Life depends on cooperation, and even small children quickly learn that their work matters. Breakfast is simple, though filling. Perhaps there is a bowl of warm oat porridge cooked slowly over the fire. Maybe yesterday's dark bread is softened with a little milk or dipped into vegetable broth. If the family is fortunate, there may be a small piece of cheese or an egg gathered that very morning. Fresh fruit is uncommon during much of the year, and sugar is a luxury that most villagers will never taste. Honey, when available, is treasured and used sparingly. Meals are eaten slowly but without much conversation. There is work waiting. As the first rays of sunlight reach the fields, adults gather their tools. Wooden plows, woven baskets, sickles, and ropes are prepared for another long day. Older children often follow their parents, learning simply by watching. No one hands them a written instruction book. Knowledge is passed from one generation to the next through careful observation. A father shows his son how to recognize healthy crops from diseased ones. A mother teaches her daughter how to knead bread dough until it feels just right. Grandparents share quiet advice gathered from decades of experience: when to plant beans, how to predict rain from the clouds, or which herbs might soothe a sore throat. Learning happens everywhere. The fields become classrooms. The kitchen becomes a workshop. The forest becomes a teacher. As the morning continues, you begin to understand something important about medieval childhood. Growing up is not measured by birthdays or school grades. It is measured by trust. The first time you are trusted to carry water without spilling it. The first time you safely gather eggs without frightening the hens. the first time your parents believe you can complete a task alone. These small moments quietly shape your journey toward adulthood. By the time the sun stands higher in the sky, much of the day's work is already well underway. For a medieval child, waking before sunrise is not unusual. It is simply the rhythm of everyday life, a rhythm followed by countless generations, guided by the seasons, the rising sun, and the quiet determination of families working together to survive. As the morning slowly passes and the village settles into its daily rhythm, you might begin to wonder something that feels perfectly natural to us today. When do the children go to school? The surprising answer is that, for most medieval children, they never do. There are no yellow school buses waiting at the end of the road. No classrooms filled with neat rows of desks. No backpacks resting by the front door. No ringing bell announcing the beginning of the day. Instead, the entire village is a classroom. Every field, workshop, kitchen, and stable offers another lesson. In medieval Europe, education depends almost entirely on who your family is and where you are born. If your parents are ordinary farmers, your education begins the moment you are old enough to walk beside them. You learn by watching. You learn by listening. And most importantly, you learn by doing. Your father doesn't sit you down with a textbook explaining how to grow wheat. Instead, he places a handful of seeds into your small palm. He kneels beside you and quietly shows you how deep each seed should be planted. He teaches you how to recognize healthy soil, how to notice the color of the sky before rain arrives, and how to understand the changing seasons. These lessons are never written down. They live inside people's memories. Your mother teaches in much the same way. As you stand beside the fire, she patiently shows you how flour and water slowly become bread. You learn to stir thick vegetable stew without burning it. You discover which herbs add flavor to food and which herbs are believed to ease sickness. At first, your hands are clumsy. Sometimes you spill water. Sometimes you burn the bread. Sometimes you forget an important step. But mistakes are expected. Every small error becomes another quiet lesson. If your family keeps sheep, you might learn how to gently shear their thick wool each spring. You watch as the wool is washed, dried, carefully combed, and finally spun into long strands of yarn. Hours later, those simple threads begin to transform into warm clothing that will protect your family during the long winter months. Nothing is wasted. Every task has value. Even collecting firewood becomes an opportunity to learn. Older children teach younger brothers and sisters how to choose dry branches instead of damp ones. You soon discover that green wood creates too much smoke, while dry oak burns slowly and keeps the cottage warm through the coldest nights. These are practical lessons, ones that could make the difference between comfort and hardship. Books, meanwhile, remain incredibly rare. Today, we can buy a book in just a few minutes or download thousands onto a small device. In the Middle Ages, creating a single book could take months, sometimes even years. Every page is written carefully by hand using ink and feather quills. Many books are copied inside quiet monasteries, where monks spend countless hours writing each letter with extraordinary patience. The pages are often made from animal skin, known as parchment. Producing enough parchment for one large book might require dozens of sheep or calves. Because of this, books are among the most valuable possessions a person can own. Most ordinary villagers will live their entire lives without ever reading one. For them, stories are not found on paper. They are spoken aloud. During long winter evenings, families gather around the fire while grandparents tell ancient tales of kings, saints, heroic knights, mysterious forests, and distant lands. Children listen carefully. Without realizing it, they are training their memories. Many medieval people become excellent listeners because remembering spoken information is an important part of everyday life. Of course, not every child grows up in exactly the same way. A small number of wealthy children experience a very different childhood. The sons of noble families are often taught to read and write, especially in Latin, the language of the church and many official documents. They study history, religion, mathematics, and manners. As they grow older, they begin learning swordsmanship, horseback riding, hunting, and the responsibilities of becoming a knight. Their days are carefully organized, filled with lessons and discipline. Noble girls may also receive an education, although it is usually focused on different skills. They learn reading, music, embroidery, household management, and sometimes several languages. As future ladies of large estates, they are expected to supervise servants, manage supplies, and welcome important guests. Some children are sent to monasteries or convents. There, the atmosphere is peaceful and quiet. Stone corridors echo softly with footsteps and prayers. The day follows a strict schedule. Children learn to read religious texts, copy beautiful handwriting, and sing sacred hymns. Life inside these religious communities is calm, orderly, and deeply connected to faith. Yet, for the vast majority of medieval children, the greatest teacher remains everyday life itself. The rising sun tells them when to begin. The changing seasons tell them what work must be done. Their parents teach them with patient hands instead of written words. Their neighbors share knowledge gathered over entire lifetimes, little by little, day after day. Without realizing it, they are preparing for adulthood, not through exams or report cards, but through experience. And in a world where survival depends on practical knowledge, these quiet daily lessons are every bit as valuable as any classroom education could ever be. By now, you might imagine that a medieval child's life was nothing but work. From sunrise until sunset, carrying water, gathering firewood, helping in the fields, and learning skills that would one day support the family. But that isn't the whole story. Even in the Middle Ages, children were still children. They laughed. They ran through open fields. They invented games. And whenever work was finished, they found small moments of joy in the simplest things. Imagine a warm afternoon after the harvest. The sun hangs low over golden fields, and the village seems quieter than usual. The day's hardest chores have been completed, and for a little while the adults allow themselves to rest. This is when the children gather. There is no playground waiting for them. No swings, no slides, no brightly colored toys. Instead, the entire village becomes a place for adventure. A fallen tree becomes a castle wall. A long stick becomes a knight's sword. A smooth pebble becomes a treasured prize in a game that only the children fully understand. Their imagination transforms ordinary objects into extraordinary worlds. Many toys are handmade. Parents, grandparents, or older brothers carve small wooden horses, tiny carts with turning wheels, spinning tops, whistles, and simple dolls from scraps of wood. Some dolls are made from pieces of cloth stuffed with wool or dried grass, their faces stitched with just a few simple threads. These toys are not perfect. Each one looks slightly different, but that is part of their charm. Because every toy has been made by hand, each carries the care of the person who created it. Ball games are also surprisingly popular. A ball might be made by wrapping scraps of cloth together or by stitching leather around wool or animal hair. Children throw it, kick it, or chase it across grassy fields until the evening shadows begin to grow long. They also enjoy games that are still familiar today, running races, hide and seek, tag, jumping over small streams, balancing along fallen logs. The rules may be different, but the laughter sounds much the same as it does now. Friendships form naturally. Most villages are small, and everyone knows one another. Children grow up side by side from infancy, helping with the same chores, attending the same church services, and celebrating the same village festivals. Older children often look after the younger ones. A 10-year-old might carry a toddler on their back while parents finish harvesting crops. Responsibility arrives early, but so does kindness. As the seasons change, the village calendar is filled with special celebrations. Harvest festivals are among the happiest days of the year. After months of hard work, families gather to give thanks for a successful harvest. Long wooden tables are covered with fresh bread, roasted meat, cheese, vegetables, and warm pies when ingredients are available. Musicians play cheerful melodies on simple instruments like flutes, bagpipes, drums, and fiddles. People dance together in open fields while children race between the adults, laughing as they chase one another beneath colorful ribbons and banners. For a medieval child, these festivals are magical. Traveling entertainers sometimes visit the village during these celebrations. Jugglers toss bright balls into the air with astonishing skill. Acrobats perform daring flips. Storytellers capture everyone's attention with tales of King Arthur, brave knights, dragons, enchanted forests, and distant kingdoms few villagers will ever see. For children who have rarely traveled beyond neighboring villages, these stories make the world seem wonderfully large and mysterious. But alongside laughter and celebration, medieval childhood is also shaped by beliefs that may seem unusual to us today. The world feels full of unseen mysteries. Many people believe that forests are home to fairies, spirits, and magical creatures. Parents sometimes warn children never to wander too far into the woods after sunset, not only because wild animals may be nearby, but because old legends speak of strange beings who might lead travelers away from the path. Whether these stories are believed literally or simply told to keep children safe, they become part of everyday life. Religion also plays an important role. Nearly every village centers around its church. Church bells mark the passing of time, calling families to prayer and reminding everyone of important feast days throughout the year. Children quickly learn Bible stories long before they can read. These stories are shared aloud by priests, parents, and grandparents, becoming part of their understanding of the world. Some families also keep small protective charms inside the home. A cross carved from wood hangs above the doorway. Bundles of fragrant herbs are placed near windows. Certain plants are believed to protect against illness or bad luck. While these customs vary from one region to another, they reveal how closely faith, tradition, and everyday life are woven together. To us, these practices may seem mysterious. To medieval families, they simply feel ordinary. As evening approaches, the games slowly come to an end. The golden light fades behind the hills. Parents call their children home. Smoke once again rises gently from cottage chimneys as supper is prepared. Tomorrow will bring another busy day. But tonight, for a few peaceful hours, the village rests. The laughter of children fades into the quiet sounds of crickets, rustling leaves, and the soft crackle of fires glowing warmly inside every humble home. As our journey through medieval childhood begins to slow, it's worth pausing to separate fact from fiction. For centuries, books, films, and television have painted the Middle Ages as a dark and joyless time, a world where children knew only hardship and fear. The truth, as history often reminds us, is far more balanced. The first myth is that medieval children never had a real childhood. In reality, they certainly worked harder than most children do today, but historical records, paintings, and handwritten manuscripts also show children playing games, laughing with friends, chasing animals through village streets, and enjoying festivals. Childhood was shorter than it is now, yet it still contained moments of wonder, curiosity, and happiness. Another common myth is that parents did not love their children because so many died young. Nothing could be further from the truth. Letters written by grieving mothers and fathers, church records, and medieval poems reveal deep affection for children. Parents mourned their sons and daughters with heartbreaking sorrow. They prayed for them, cared for them when they were sick, and celebrated every milestone they reached. Love has always been part of being human, no matter the century. Another misconception is that medieval children were dirty all the time. While daily hot baths were uncommon, people were not completely unconcerned with cleanliness. Families washed their faces and hands, cleaned their clothing when possible, and many towns had public bathhouses. Good hygiene looked different from today's standards, but it was certainly not ignored. Many people also imagine that every child spent their life trapped inside a gloomy castle. In truth, castles housed only a tiny part of the population. Most medieval children grew up in small villages surrounded by open fields, rivers, forests, and farmland. Their days were spent outdoors beneath wide skis rather than behind stone walls. Perhaps the biggest myth is that medieval life was endlessly miserable. Life was undoubtedly difficult. Long winters tested every family. Poor harvests brought hunger. Disease could spread without warning. Yet alongside these hardships came friendship, laughter, music, Storytelling, celebrations, weddings, village fairs, and quiet evenings spent beside a warm fire. People found joy wherever they could. In many ways, they were not so different from us. They worried about their families. They hoped for good harvests. They dreamed of brighter tomorrows. And they cherished the simple moments that made life meaningful. History reminds us that every generation faces challenges, but every generation also finds reasons to smile. Now the day is drawing gently to close. The last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the rolling hills, leaving the medieval village wrapped in soft shades of blue and silver. One by one, the cottages grow quiet. Smoke rises lazily from thatched roofs before fading into the cool evening sky. Inside each home, supper has finished. Wooden bowls have been washed. The animals are safely tucked into their shelters. The doors are closed against the night's chill. Children curl beneath rough wool blankets, tired after a long day spent helping their families, exploring fields, and filling the village with laughter. Outside, the only sounds are the distant hoot of an owl, the gentle chirping of crickets, and the quiet rustle of leaves moving in the evening breeze. There are no streetlights, no engines, no glowing windows stretching across the horizon, only darkness. And thousands of brilliant stars shining above the peaceful countryside. Perhaps a grandfather tells one final story before everyone falls asleep, a tale of brave knights, a wise king, or a mysterious traveler who wandered through enchanted forests many years ago. The younger children listen with heavy eyelids. Before long, the story fades into silence. Tomorrow, the rooster will crow once again before sunrise. The fields will wait patiently. The bread will need baking. The animals will need feeding. Life will continue as it has for generations, simple, steady, guided by the changing seasons and the rising sun. As we quietly leave this medieval village behind, we may notice that although the centuries have changed our homes, our technology, and our daily routines, some things remain wonderfully familiar. The comfort of family, the warmth of friendship, the joy of learning, the hope carried into every new morning. These timeless parts of childhood have never truly disappeared. And now, our peaceful journey through the childhood of the Middle Ages comes to an end. Thank you for spending this quiet evening exploring the lives of ordinary children who lived hundreds of years before us. As you rest tonight, perhaps imagine that distant village one last time. The cottages stand peacefully beneath a sky full of stars. The fire glows softly inside each home. The village sleeps. And history, for now, gently closes another chapter. May your dreams be calm. May your night be peaceful. And may the quiet stories of the past stay with you until morning. Sleep well. And I'll see you in the next chapter of history.